Hello, everybody. Welcome to our 14.0 GitLab retrospective. I'm Tanya Pizitny, the Interim Director of Quality Engineering here at GitLab. I'm here to moderate for this retrospective. So we're going to have four different steps to this. We'll discuss the previous retro improvement tasks. We'll go through our two decided discussion topics. We'll summarize our improvements to track for next release, and then we'll do a quick wrap up. So Christopher, if you're here, you have the first previous retrospective task.
Yeah, I'm here. Thanks. Yeah, so we had some confusion around the crypto mining pipeline abuse issue, which basically took away from the effectiveness of the team. So we did some retro on that, both synchronously and synchronously, and came away with some bullet points on that topic. I think one of the things is definitely number one is making sure all the teams that are involved with the issue are brought into the discussion early on, as soon as the problem is first brought to light, and make sure that the appropriate channels are pinged, such as product. We could have had broader impact from other product teams outside of fulfillment on this problem. I think we're doing a pretty good job on this. Second issue across GitLab is just being more proactive about monitoring for abuse and capacity and performance issues. There's multiple tasks in the pipeline currently to kind of improve on this. I think just catching some of these abuse issues faster would make the reaction a little bit more efficient. Just on the blog, this is kind of more operational issue, just making sure that if we have to announce something on the blog, that it's ready in time for people to review it, maybe a day in advance. If there's lack of cohesion on the direction, we might have to go more synchronous, just to make sure other teams and other people involved are in agreement about the direction of the problem and the way we're going to address it. So this may require more synchronous than we typically used to, but if we have to act quickly, that might be necessary. After deciding on direction, just execute and iterate. Just make sure that we stay clear on the direction and iterate on that direction, and not change it frequently while we're in the process of executing on it. And if you're looking for more details on this issue, there's an issue open with some specific notes on sort of our conclusions on it.
Great, thank you so much. I have the next one. So this is around improving retrospective participation. I'm happy to say that there's been better participation with every retro this quarter. So a genuine heartfelt thank you to everybody who's spent a lot of time filling in information here to try to collaborate asynchronously. I wasn't able to pull in anyone from outside of R&D for this retro, but the next retro moderator, which should be Kenny Johnson, could consider doing that for the upcoming retro. Donald, you have the next two.
Yeah, thanks, Tanya. So for the first one, it was around the team retros, and when we open them, we had some conversations around the current state in opening retros at the end of a milestone. And we had suggested opening that up earlier, did a little bit of discovery, found that the retro issues are created fairly early in the milestone, I want to say around the 26th, but we don't ping the team members until later on, like towards the end of the milestone or even after the milestone is complete. So I created an MR to essentially notify or ping the team right when the issue is created. If anyone has any objections to that, please comment in that MR. Otherwise, we'll merge that in the next couple of days. And for 14.3, maybe, I think everyone will be pinged if it's merged in. For second one was around process clarity to high severity priority bugs that came through. The MR we created there was within the plan team handbook page, just essentially empowering engineers to, or adding clarity to allowing or having engineers deprioritize other things if a P1 or S1 comes in, and kind of defining what the process should be around how to handle those. That was just merging last week. I did have a note in here saying that we'll monitor it after that was merged in, and then if it works, we'll add a change to the more global handbook page. We haven't had enough time to really get a whole lot of P1 S1s, so I'll move this on to as another action item for the next retro, and we can kind of reevaluate it then. Tanya, you have the last point here.
Yeah, thank you, Donald. So the last point, last retro, we discussed automating the release post MR merging where possible, and specifically this was for changes that had not yet been merged, but we were tracking and hoping to merge for a specific release. There's been an issue created to track this, so your collaboration would be appreciated, async, in that issue when you have a moment. Great, so we are moving on now to the discussion topics. Both of the proposers are not here, so I'll vocalize. The first one is from Dan Jensen from Managed Compliance. He said, we were very close to having a completely broken development environment because it took such a long time to get the company JetBrains IDE licenses renewed. It would be nice to renew licenses for tools at least a month before they expire, so there's no threat of disruption. So we're curious, has this been an issue for other tools, for other groups? And if there's any way to automate renewal reminders or any other ways to improve this process? And Christopher, I think you have the first discussion point.
I was just asking Dan, there should have probably been an issue associated with this. So I'd love for us to add that to this document, and I'll try to look at this one. I know that there's been at least one other contract that we've kind of run up very close to the line and even asked for an extension from the provider. That was a particularly thorny one, for lack of a better term for it. So, but this one seems like it would be kind of much more common. So it feels like something we should probably investigate, because at least we have at least 2 cases of it. And Dan may not be on the call, so if not, I'll ask him async for that information.
Has anyone else run into this, or has anyone have ideas for how we can help resolve this?
I think this must be an issue across all of our SaaS tools that we have subscriptions for. So if there might be a process on the IT side where they get reminders and they're hopefully renewing the licenses across all of our different tools before the time's up.
I just had a question. Is there a DRI for these licenses, or who's ultimately responsible?
I thought for the JetBrains licenses that IP had been managing those.
So I think that it would help if we had some clarity on the ownership of who owns the licenses, and then I would think it would be their responsibility to make sure there's a plan in place to make sure they're renewed.
And Christopher, you believe that there's already an issue created here, so another one wouldn't need to be created?
Well, the issue I'm asking for is the actual license renewal issue, which as part of our normal license renewals, typically an issue is created that kind of works through the process. So that wouldn't be the issue created. That would be, that's of the renewal itself. So we need to create a separate issue to actually track this to figure out like how we could improve the process. So I think, yeah, this is a good one for us to have a follow up on.
Yeah, I can follow up with Dan asynchronously, and we can get an issue created, and we'll track it for next release as well.
Cool. And you can delegate across up or down to Tanya. You don't feel that you need to drive this one. But if anybody wants to volunteer, we're probably willing to accept for volunteers.
I'll just throw in my 2 cents on this really quick. I've been in this position in the past where as we're coming up on licenses, whatever that license renewal rate is, whether it's annual or every 2 years or what have you, having something trigger 3 months before, and if there's some sort of challenge aspect to it, as a, do we need to renew this license? Is there some other competitor or something else we should be using instead of? Just kick that process off about 3 months before the current license expires, and then just work through it.
And if I'm not mistaken, IP would be doing the renewal, but wouldn't necessarily be the DRI for deciding if we would continue to use the tool. So the 3-month lead time would probably be helpful there to get the cross-functional collaboration. Is that right, Todd?
I honestly am not sure who the DRI is for this. I'd say other companies historically, it'd be some form of IT that would be responsible for it, but I can't answer definitively for here.
As a FYI, I added a link over to our procurement page where there's a section on software renewal. It looks like we switched over to a tool called Coupa, where you can create a requisition along with that issue that Christopher was talking about.
Okay, great. I'll touch base with Dan and we'll create an issue and then we'll follow up in the next retro about what the next steps will be for this. Awesome, thank you all. The next one is from Seth Berger from Secure Dynamic Analysis. He said, our group had trouble understanding when breaking changes should be committed and when they would be deployed to GitLab.com. There was a bit of uncertainty about 14.0 and a lot of information was available only by Slack. How can we make 15.0 smoother and ensure all teams know what their responsibilities are? And he also included an illustration of the discussion around breaking changes in the 14.0 release. And he's asking if that should belong in the development docs or the handbook or somewhere else. Christopher, you've got the first point.
Yeah, just going to echo it. Definitely, like I just did a quick search and couldn't find any documentation around, like there's good documentation around the release coming up to the release process about notification around deprecated features and other pieces, but not that, okay, like here's how we would view it from a timeline perspective. As far as when we expect that, and it feels like it requires, given the way I saw that conversation going, it feels like a product wants to be involved in that, so we should probably involve somebody from product, and then obviously somebody from infrastructure and development. I didn't look at the participant list, but I'm guessing from product, Farnoosh would be the best person to potentially help with that, since you focus on product operations.
And just adding in here that from the delivery perspective, so 14.0, we were a little bit exceptional in that we shared a bit more on the timeline. Generally, we adhere with the timeline here that the only guaranteed date we have is the 22nd, which I understand makes things a bit difficult, but the reason for that is just the level of uncertainty as we run up towards the release. So yeah, definitely happy to work out how we can make this stuff more clear, but that's actually the reason why we don't normally have a published timeline of what's going to happen exactly every day.
Yeah, I don't know if Seth, are you on the call? No, he's not on the call.
He's not.
Yeah, so I think Amy, I totally get why we have that part of it. I think what development would say is what we're actually looking for is not the definitive time for when the release candidate is picked, but like what's the date that we should shoot for from the development to basically have stuff in to guarantee it's turned on in production. So
yeah,
totally,
like
if you said
I knew we have a window, it was like here's the merge window, here's the release window, and it was trying to hit between that. So yeah, fully
yeah. So if you said like for instance that like we should have like to guarantee it's going to be in, we have to have it done on the 7th as an example. That's totally a reasonable request. 2 weeks out from that perspective. So, but then that's where we need to make sure product is aligned and that aspect of it.
Exactly. Yeah, makes sense.
Okay.
And please clarify if I'm wrong. I wonder, I think some of the things that ran into issues here were because teams had other reactionary work that they needed to complete. So it pushed the timelines out, which then bumped against being able to be included in the release or not. I wonder if for major releases and for breaking changes like this, if it would make sense to work on them in the .12 release, but not merge them until the .0 release. So that way you know that they're ready. Reactionary work won't impact, and they can be merged early and accounted for. Would anybody else agree that that was a problem that they hit, that reactionary work pushed out their expected breaking changes work?
Not breaking
Oh.
changes for, oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead, Stephen.
Yeah, not breaking changes for us, but we did see that pattern, where work came in and disrupted us. One of the things I threw a comment lower in the doc there that we tried to bite off and finish as many small things as we could early in the release to leave like larger windows of time to deal with more complex changes. That seemed to work really well for us.
I was going to say, I think the product concern here was not, and that discussion is reflective, is not sort of does it make the release? It's that because GitLab.com has continuous deployments, if breaking changes hit .com before announcements are made, that disrupts enterprise.com customers. It's a difference of self-managed release happens on the 22nd, and those customers that do that know when that release is going to hit their environment. But to .com, you can ship a breaking change in theory on the 18th of a month prior to the release. And customers wouldn't know that because the release post for 14 that says that breaking change sort of doesn't come out for another 30 or 40 days. And I think that's where product is concerned, is how do we time continuous deployment of .com with changes in things being on that break things for customers using GitLab.com or GitLab SaaS.
But if we're following the deprecation process, we should be announcing that even earlier than that, right? Like it's basically 2 releases prior we're announcing. So I think what we probably need to do is pick a date. And it wasn't that the code actually wasn't ready. It was just actually just turning the feature flag on and then effectively enabling it by default for that breaking change in the release itself. So I think it's more we got to kind of pick a line in the sand, so to speak, of, hey, here's when we would basically enable it from that perspective. Otherwise, we're going to wait another major release cycle for that if we miss that window.
Yeah, and I think
Kai,
product does announce those things ahead of time. It's just that
there's always
I'm
somebody
a customer.
Yeah. There's all these customers who are going to miss it. They're not going to see the announcement. There's those aspects. I don't disagree with all that.
Yeah, I think it's more if I'm a customer, does that break on the day 14 is released, or does it break on some arbitrary, random, undecided day prior to 14, right? Like I, as a customer, need to be able to plan for my APIs changing or whatever I have to change without it happening on random Tuesday at 1 o'clock sometime, because that's when .com deployed.
Yeah, so if we need to pick a date, let's pick a date.
That's the feedback I received from 4 of my .com customers, Kai. Exactly what you said. They just want to know a date. It took them 4 hours to fix an API, and they said that's not great, but it's only 4 hours. But what happens when it takes more? How do we know this? Where do we get it notified to? If it's to me and then I have to notify them, that's fine. No banners or anything like that, because they won't want to be inundated with banners since sometimes we release twice a day. They would always have to be dismissing them, but they just need to know when they can make those changes and how. That's the biggest, I guess, feedback from just .com in general is
So the way I've dealt with this at other companies is we've basically offered like a pre-period, kind of like, either through a different route. So customers can actually test things out prior to change like that. Is that something that we should be considering as a feature capability for the product?
I think based on their feedback, that would be nice. At least they could try it and have an option to do that. They want to push it out as far as they can, right? When it's the 14.0 changes until the 22nd, but they also like the fact that we do release and they get daily updates. So it's kind of like there's no sweet spot, right? they like both. I think the majority of the feedback though is we would like to be able to test that if we can. So 'cause sometimes they come in at 6 or 2 in the morning and something breaks. And then when everybody else comes at 8 a.m., they're sending emails out and questioning what's going on, and they don't know the communication. So if they had the option, that would be nice.
If it'd be anecdotal information, but if you had captive customers and during these conversations, you said you had 4, if we could get feedback of, hey, if you had this 2 months ahead of time to actually try out, but you had to change your routes effectively to go test this, would they be receptive to that? Because that'd be good feedback for a product team to understand.
Okay, I have some calls tomorrow. I can get that feedback. Thank you.
And for everybody's awareness, I think that Kenny is CRI for leading a specific 14.0 retro for how to improve the next major release. I think that any kind of documentation changes or things like this, the breaking changes timing, could be funneled into there. I don't have an issue at hand, but I'll add it to this document when I'm able to find one. Perfect. So keeping on track, we're moving on to the improvements for the next release to track. Christopher, you've got the first one.
Yeah, so down in the summary or down below, there was a note around maintainer availability and some anecdotal information of no surprise as we get closer to the release date, maintainer availability potentially decreases. So I opened an issue basically to kind of see if we can get some qualitative data that we'll probably try to quantify in some fashion to basically look at, what's our maintainer availability look like, and working with both, I think, engineering productivity, since they have that capability to turn on and off, or they provide that capability. So hopefully they'll know how we can either record that or figure out a way to basically measure that if the data is not already available, because I feel like that's a worthwhile investigation.
Just want to chime in that we do have an issue open on having a label to measure deprecations. Right now it's under maintenance, but this might be a good business case to just track this specifically on that point.
And Donald, you've got the next one.
Sorry, I lost the thing, but that's just a continuation from the action item for this retro, I believe. Yep, to add clarity. So I'll keep an eye on that.
Perfect. And the next one is mine. This is around the licensing timelines. So I'll create an issue and link it here and delegate it, and then whoever it's delegated to will follow up for next release. Are there any other improvements that folks would like to track for the next release that aren't already listed here?
I can add some feedback, but this feedback I got this morning was documentation on breaking changes for 14.0 that weren't documented, like pages, and maybe I missed it, but the customer said that some of the stuff that they did find was buried, and it took them a while to find it, and the only way that they found out that pages was broken was they updated the test environment, and they found some issues that a couple of people have given fixes for, but they're going to be deprecated in 14.3. So number one, they didn't find that information, or it's not documented. Number two, once they got feedback on how to fix it, it's basically you have 30 months to fix it before it's deprecated. So what they said is it feels like a hack, and yes, it's appreciated that it's a workaround, but that doesn't really give us any options to go forward. There are some issues that I can post where there is some feedback of like how to help, and so they are appreciative of that. But at the same time, they have 13,000 users and they upgrade at the end of the month, and they're saying it's just doesn't seem like a very communicative release. So they're just looking for more options on how to fix those things because they want to keep upgrading, but now they're saying that they may stay at 14.2 or 14.3 for a little bit until we have those fixes.
All right, awkward silence achieved, and we're right at time. Thank you everybody for participating.